The Mercedes S-Class glided smoothly down 6th Avenue under a light October drizzle. Inside, the air was so tense one could almost hear the second-hand tick. Madeline Pierce, CEO of Aurelia Dynamics, was struggling with her phone. Her voice trembled. "Richard, what did you just say?" "That's impossible. All 3 interpreting agencies are fully booked." Her hands shook uncontrollably. Mascara smeared. The golden hair once neatly tied up was now in disarray. "This is a $1.2 billion deal, Richard. The Nakamura Singh delegation will land in 90 minutes. In the front seat, Evan Carlisle, the 52-year-old driver, tried to focus on the rain-slick road, but he could hear every word. He knew this situation. Aurelia Dynamics was on the brink of collapse. Soft jazz hummed from the radio. Evan reached forward to turn it off, hoping she could concentrate better. But before his hand could touch the button, Madeline's head snapped around, sharp as a blade. "Keep your gorilla hands off my car!" The air froze. Evan's hand stopped midair. In the rearview mirror, his usually gentle blue eyes reflected something different. Not anger, but a deep exhaustion. 3 years. 3 years of words like that. Madeline wasn't done. Her voice was razor-sharp. "You think being my driver gives you the right to touch my things? You're just help. Know your place." Evan tightened his grip on the wheel. His knuckles turned white. His eyes fixed straight ahead, where Manhattan Avenue blurred through the rain. But in his mind, memories were crystal clear, as if it had all happened yesterday. Tokyo, G7 Summit 2015. He'd stood behind 3 presidents, his voice preventing a trade war. Georgetown, honorary doctorate. Harvard, master's degree in applied linguistics. 22 years serving the U.S. State Department. Fluent in 9 languages. And now? The help. Madeline exhaled sharply, her voice icy. "Raise the divider. I'm done looking at you." The glass partition slid up with a faint hiss. In the back seat, Madeline returned to her desperate phone calls. Up front, Evan sat motionless in silence, his jaw clenched. Not a single tear fell. Because Evan Carlisle knew something Madeline Pierce did not. The man she had just called a gorilla was about to save her entire empire. The Mercedes rolled through the rain, splitting 2 separate worlds. Behind the partition, Madeline Pierce, in a $5,000 Armani suit, was unraveling. She made her 7th call. "Susan, I don't care if it costs $50,000. Find me someone who speaks Japanese and Mandarin, right now." Her voice cracked. "No, we can't postpone." They'll withdraw for good. 3 years of negotiation. Gone. In front of the partition, Evan Carlisle drove on, face impassive. But inside him raged another storm. On this same road a year ago, the Berlin deal had collapsed because of a communication error. 6 months ago, the Seoul negotiation fell apart because Madeline used the wrong Korean grammar while speaking to Samsung's CEO. $40 million, gone. He knew how to fix it, but he'd chosen silence. Why? Because she'll never listen. But today was different. Today, 200 people were about to lose their jobs, including him. And Lily, his daughter, a sophomore at Johns Hopkins, still thought her father was a linguistics consultant writing a book. She had no idea her father was just a driver. Each month, Evan wired her tuition, $68,000 a year, with the message, "Here's Dad's research funding for this month, sweetheart." And Lily always replied, "You're the best dad in the world." Every time he read that message, Evan clenched his teeth and kept driving. Madeline's phone kept ringing. Only voicemail. She trembled, dialing again in despair. Through the rear camera, Evan could see her pacing in the car like a trapped animal. Hair loose, mascara streaked, eyes swollen. This was no longer the woman once featured on the cover of Forbes. This was someone drowning. And Evan knew the truth. Aurelia Dynamics had only 3 months left before bankruptcy. 3 years behind the wheel had given him enough inside knowledge to know that. Madeline's next call was to Richard Morrison, her legal advisor. "Richard, if they pull out, if they—" Her voice broke. For the first time in 3 years, Evan heard Madeline Pierce on the verge of tears. And that was the moment he made his decision. He lowered the partition. "Excuse me, Miss Pierce." Madeline flinched, eyes blazing. "I told you—" Evan interrupted, his voice deep and calm. "What language do you need?" The air froze. Madeline's mouth opened, then closed. She forgot all about Richard on the other end of the line. What did you just say?" Evan met her gaze through the mirror, his tone steady, professional. "For the merger. Which languages do you need?" That's none of your business." "Japanese, Mandarin," Evan continued softly. "Also Hindi and Korean." Something in his voice made Madeline falter. This was no longer the quiet chauffeur she'd known for 3 years. "I'm fluent in Japanese, Mandarin, Hindi, Korean, Arabic, Portuguese, French, German, and Spanish." Madeline's world flipped upside down. Her phone slipped from her hand and hit the leather floor with a dull thud. You speak 9 languages? Would you like me to prove it?" Before she could respond, her phone rang again. The name flashing on the screen made her stomach drop. "Nakamura Keiretsu. Tokyo HQ." Madeleine looked at the phone, then at Evan, then back at the phone. Pride and desperation waged war in her eyes. The ringtone kept echoing. Finally, she handed the phone through the small opening in the divider, her hand trembling. She said nothing, but both of them knew. This was the moment everything changed. If you believe that sometimes the most underestimated person can be the one who changes the entire world, then hit subscribe to see what happens next. And tell me, what do you think Madeline Pierce will do when she learns that her driver once negotiated on behalf of 3 U.S. presidents? Evan lifted the phone to his ear. His voice changed completely. Gone was the modest, hesitant tone of a chauffeur. What emerged instead was calm, confident, and authoritative. The voice of a man who had once lived in the world of diplomacy. "Moshi Moshi, Nakamura-san, Kochira wa Evan Carlyle to Moshimas." The line went still. There was a brief silence. Then a man's voice replied in flawless, fluid Japanese. Madeline sat frozen. She didn't understand what they were saying, but she could feel something. A shift in the air. Evan's tone wasn't merely interpreting. He was negotiating. He tilted his head slightly, listening carefully, nodding, occasionally responding with phrases that softened the voice on the other end, made it warmer, more personal. The way he said, "Nakamura-san," the precise rhythm of his pauses, every gesture carried a deep cultural respect. Then, another voice joined in, sharp and fast, speaking Mandarin. Without a heartbeat of hesitation, Evan switched languages, flowing seamlessly, his pronunciation round and native-like. Technical terms began to appear: intellectual property, transfer of ownership, market entry strategy. Madeline recognized these words. They were the most sensitive points in the merger, the ones she was risking everything to hold together. And the man she had called a gorilla 20 minutes ago was now discussing those very issues in 3 different languages, as if he had been born to do this. 20 minutes passed. The Mercedes continued to glide through the rain-soaked towers of Manhattan. But inside, time stood still. At last, Evan bowed his head slightly, though the person on the other end couldn't see, and ended the call with respectful grace. "Arigato gozaimasu, Nakamura-san." He handed the phone back to Madeleine. "They're looking forward to meeting you in person. The merger discussions are back on track." Madeleine stared at the phone as if it were a ticking bomb. Then she looked at Evan, her voice hoarse. "What? What did you just do?" Evan looked straight ahead, his tone calm and professional, as if this were something he did every day. "Just a small cultural misunderstanding. Your legal team used overly aggressive language in the preliminary contract. They felt they were being treated as subordinates, not as partners." The color drained from Madeleine's face. "What kind of misunderstanding?" "The kind that can kill a deal." The car crossed an intersection, red light reflecting across Evan's stern face. "I explained that Aurelia Dynamics deeply respects their family business legacy. That you took time to study Japanese corporate customs to show your regard." Madeleine's mouth fell open in disbelief. "But I never," Evan replied evenly. "Now you have." He said it without turning his gaze, eyes fixed on the road, while Madeleine sat there in silence as the rain outside fell harder than ever. The Mercedes turned into the underground parking lot of Aurelia Dynamics at 1290 Avenue of the Americas. The engine went quiet, leaving only the echo of stillness against the cold concrete walls. Madeleine could hear her own heartbeat. "Evan." For the first time in 3 years, she called his name. "I need to know everything." Evan met her eyes through the rear-view mirror. For a brief moment, the divider between them looked like a real wall. Then he nodded slightly. Ph.D. in International Relations, Georgetown. Master's in Applied Linguistics, Harvard. 22 years as a senior diplomatic interpreter for the U.S. State Department. Each word struck Madeleine like a hammer to the chest. "I specialized in multinational negotiations, G7 summits, trade agreements, crisis mediation." He paused, voice steady and low. "Budget cuts erased my position 3 years ago. I needed work immediately." "Your mother's medical bills," Madeleine murmured, remembering fragments of phone calls she'd overheard. "Cancer, wasn't it?" Evan nodded. "Cancer treatment. And my daughter's medical school tuition. Lily studies at Johns Hopkins. She wants to be a pediatric oncologist because she watched her grandmother fight the disease." The fluorescent light above them cast a cold glow. Madeleine looked down at her trembling hands. "I sent out more than 300 job applications," Evan continued. "Overqualified for some, too old for the rest." "So you became a driver?" "I became whatever I had to be, to survive." Their eyes met in the mirror. In that instant, the 3 years of quiet service behind the wheel suddenly took on a massive weight, a presence she had never truly seen. Her phone buzzed. A text from Rebecca, her assistant. The Nakamura delegation arrived early. They're in the lobby, asking about cultural protocols. No one knows what to say. "They're here," Madeleine whispered. Evan stepped out, walked around the car, and opened her door. Same motion, same professional grace as always. But this time, everything was different. Madeleine rose to her feet, looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time. "Will you help me save my company?" Evan lifted his gaze, eyes steady and bright. "Let's save it together, Ms. Pierce." The elevator ascended quietly to the 15th floor. Madeleine stood beside Evan, the distance between them barely a meter, yet it felt like an entire universe. She glanced at him through the mirrored elevator wall, the black chauffeur's uniform, the neatly knotted tie. A 52-year-old face lined with creases, not from time, but from everything he had seen, carried, and endured in silence. 3 years. 3 years of seeing this man every day, yet never truly seeing him. "Evan," she began, her voice hoarse, "this morning in the car, Ms. Pierce." Evan interrupted, gentle yet firm. "We have 16 hours to prepare for the most important meeting in your company's history. Personal apologies can wait." He was right. But Madeleine couldn't shake the sound. "Keep your gorilla hands off my car." Her own words still hung between them like smoke after a fire. The elevator doors slid open. Rebecca Nolan, her 28-year-old assistant with neatly tied red hair, came running, face pale. "Madeleine, thank God. The advanced delegation is in meeting room A. They're asking about cultural protocols and nobody knows." "Handled," Madeleine cut her off, her tone decisive. "Rebecca, this is Evan Carlyle, our new translation advisor." Rebecca froze. Her eyes dropped to Evan's chauffeur uniform, then flicked back to Madeleine in confusion. "I'm sorry. What did you just say?" "Mr. Carlyle will be overseeing all international communications for the merger." "But he's a Georgetown PhD, fluent in 9 languages." Madeleine's voice was sharp as glass. "Any further questions?" Color flooded Rebecca's cheeks. She lowered her gaze. "No, ma'am." "Good." Madeleine turned to Evan. "One small thing." Evan waited. "You should probably change before meeting the delegation." For the first time, Evan smiled, a faint, calm smile tinged with quiet sadness. "You're right." Rebecca escorted Evan down to the lobby, to the luxury menswear store Aurelia Dynamics kept stocked for emergency meetings. Left alone, Madeleine stood in her corner office on the 42nd floor, a glass room facing Central Park, now just a gray Manhattan drowned in rain. She looked down at her hands, still trembling. And again, she heard her own voice echoing, "Keep your gorilla hands off my car." Who had said that? What kind of woman had said that? Madeleine walked to the liquor cabinet, poured herself a glass of 25-year Macallan whiskey, took a sip, then set it by the window. In the reflection, she saw a 41-year-old woman, blonde hair, blue eyes, a $5,000 Armani suit, and a soul she no longer recognized. Her phone buzzed, a name she hadn't dialed in 2 years. M.O.M. Madeleine picked up. "Mom?" "Maddie, sweetheart." The warm voice of Eleanor Pierce, 68, retired in Vermont, filled the line. "I saw the news. Heard your big deal is about to close?" "Yes, Mom." "Are you all right? You sound tired." Madeleine gazed out the window. Raindrops streaked down the glass. And suddenly, tears welled up. "Mom, I think I've forgotten what you used to teach me." Silence on the other end. Then her mother's voice, soft as a breeze. "Maddie, I taught you that strength isn't about who you look down on, but who you still see when they're beneath you." A sob caught in Madeleine's throat. "I did something awful today, Mom." "Then fix it, sweetheart," Eleanor said gently. "It's never too late to become who you want to be." Madeleine closed her eyes. Tears slipped down, merging with the sound of rain outside. 15 minutes later, the office door opened, and Madeleine had to stop herself from gasping. Evan walked in, dressed in a navy Hugo Boss suit that fit his broad shoulders perfectly, a silver silk tie, polished black Oxford shoes. His hair was neatly combed. A few silver strands glinted faintly, only adding to his presence. But the biggest change wasn't the clothes. It was his bearing. His shoulders squared, his chin lifted. The blue eyes that once stayed lowered in silence now met hers, steady, confident, composed. This was no longer her driver. This was a diplomat. A man who had once sat in negotiations where wars could begin or end with a single wrong word. "Better?" Evan asked. "Much better," Madeline murmured, her voice smaller now. Rebecca appeared at the door. "Meeting room A is ready. The advance delegation is waiting." Madeline drew a deep breath, straightened her suit. But before stepping out, she turned back. "Evan, are you ready?" Evan Carlisle, the former senior interpreter of the U.S. State Department, underestimated for 3 long years, smiled with quiet confidence. "Ms. Pierce, I've mediated disputes between nations. I think I can handle a business meeting." For the first time in months, Madeline Pierce felt something she had long forgotten: hope. The two of them walked out of the office side by side. No longer boss and employee, but two people about to fight for the same cause. Conference Room A of Aurelia Dynamics radiated that distinct American sense of authority. A 10-meter walnut table, Italian leather chairs, glass walls overlooking 6th Avenue. But today, the air inside was thick, stretched tight like a string about to snap. The advance delegation from Nakamura Group consisted of 3 senior Japanese directors and 1 interpreter. They all stood up at once when Madeline and Evan entered. Evan stepped forward. He bowed. Depth, angle, and duration measured to the exact second. Not too low to seem servile, not too high to appear arrogant. Then he spoke, in Japanese. His voice carried no trace of an American accent, none of that foreign speaker trying to sound polite tone. It was the voice of someone who had lived within that culture. The lead director, Mr. Tanaka, blinked in surprise. Then he smiled and replied with a long, warm sentence. Evan turned to Madeline and said quietly, "Mr. Tanaka says they're pleased that Aurelia Dynamics sent someone who truly understands Japanese culture. He feels respected." Madeline nodded, her heart pounding. "Tell him Aurelia Dynamics doesn't see this as a deal, but as a long-term relationship between 2 family-run legacies." Evan gave a subtle nod and translated, but he didn't just relay her words. He interpreted her tone, adding cultural nuance, weaving phrases with a Japanese rhythm that conveyed sincerity and grace. The atmosphere began to shift. The tension slowly melted. The meeting unfolded with almost unbelievable smoothness. But at minute 35, Mr. Tanaka's expression suddenly changed. He spoke at length, his tone deepening, pointing at a clause in the contract. Evan listened, eyes narrowing slightly. "Something wrong?" Madeline whispered. Evan turned to her, voice serious. "Mr. Tanaka says Clause 7 in the draft contract is written too directly. In Japanese culture, that phrasing implies we see them as subordinates, not equal partners." The color drained from Madeline's face. That was exactly the kind of mistake that could destroy 3 years of negotiation. "Which clause?" "The one about final decision authority." Evan switched back to Japanese, his voice calm, warm, steady. He explained something, with a tone that sounded like smoothing turbulent waters. Mr. Tanaka listened, his expression firm at first, then gradually softened. Evan continued. This time, he told a story. Madeline caught fragments of English woven into the Japanese. "Father, reconstruction." A brief silence followed. Then Mr. Tanaka nodded firmly, smiling faintly, speaking at length with genuine warmth. "What did he say?" Madeline asked softly. Evan replied, his tone low and composed. "He said his father once worked with Americans after the war. He understands that sometimes American legal language sounds rigid, but the true intent is cooperation. He's agreed to revise the clause toward a more balanced form. Madeline exhaled, relieved, unaware that her hands were trembling. But a single question echoed in her mind. What did Evans say to make a Japanese executive change his stance in just a few minutes? When the delegation finally left, with warm handshakes and rare smiles, Madeline closed the conference room door behind them. Only she and Evan remained. "What did you say to Mr. Tanaka?" she asked, her voice still hoarse. "About your father, and rebuilding after the war?" Evan removed his suit jacket and hung it on the chair. For the first time, Madeline noticed a hint of fatigue in him. "I told him about my father. He was a civil engineer who worked in Japan from 1947 to 1952, helping rebuild Tokyo." Madeline sat down, silent. "My father taught me that true cooperation doesn't live in contracts. It lives in trust." In two sides, building something greater than themselves, Evan turned toward the window, where Manhattan was fading into the colors of dusk. "I told him that his father, a survivor of Hiroshima, and mine once worked together, not as former enemies, but as men rebuilding the future." His voice slowed, carrying a quiet ache. "I told him this merger isn't just about money. It's about continuing what our fathers began." Madeline felt her throat tighten. "Was that true?" "Every word." The room fell silent. Outside, Manhattan's lights began to glow, glittering like an inverted sky. "Evan," Madeline whispered, "these past 3 years, how many of my meetings have you listened to?" "All of them." "And you knew the company was near bankruptcy?" "I knew." Since last August, Madeline ran a hand through her hair, nearly groaning. "Why didn't you say anything? Why didn't you help me sooner?" Evan met her gaze, his eyes kind but sorrowful. "Miss Pierce, I tried. Many times. But a driver isn't supposed to have opinions on corporate strategy, is he?" Memories flooded back. A year ago, Evan had said, "Ms. Pierce, about the Seoul meeting. Maybe we should—" And she'd cut him off. "Evan, you're just the driver. Don't try to be smart. 6 months ago." "Ms. Pierce, I think the German team may have misunderstood." "I didn't hire you to think, Evan." Each line came back now, stabbing straight into her chest. So many lost chances. So many disasters that could have been avoided. "My fault," Madeline whispered, eyes glassy. "All my fault." Evan slipped his jacket back on, his voice calm but steady. "Miss Pierce, we have 14 hours before the main meeting. The past doesn't matter anymore. Only the future." He placed a thick folder in front of her. "Here's everything you need to know about tomorrow's attendees, their histories, personalities, decision styles, and triggers." Madeline opened it. Dozens of pages of handwritten notes, meticulous, organized, precise, like State Department dossiers. "When did you make all this?" she asked quietly. Evan smiled, a faint but luminous smile. "I have had quite a lot of free time these past 3 years, Miss Pierce." 9 p.m. The offices of Aurelia Dynamics were empty. Only the light from the boardroom remained, where Madeline and Evan still sat amid a mountain of documents. The table was buried in papers. Organizational charts of Nakamura Keiretsu, the Singh family dossiers, cultural analyses of Japan and India, and pages of negotiation strategies written in 3 languages. Madeline looked across the table. Evan was bent over his notes, brow furrowed in deep concentration. She held her 5th cup of coffee that night. "Evan," she said softly, "can I ask you something personal?" He looked up. "Why are you still helping me?" "After everything I've said, after the way I've treated you for 3 years?" Evan set down his pen. The silence stretched long enough for her to think he wouldn't answer. Then he opened his wallet and took out an old photograph. "This is Lily, my daughter." Madeline looked at the picture. A young woman with a bright smile, wearing a white medical student's coat. 22. Second year at Johns Hopkins, majoring in pediatric oncology. His voice softened as he spoke of her. "Lily wants to heal children with cancer because she watched her grandmother fight the disease." He paused, swallowing hard. 3 months ago, Lily called me crying. She said she might have to transfer to a community college because tuition was too high. Madeline felt as if someone had punched her in the gut. "I told her not to worry, that I'd take care of it. But the truth is," his voice cracked, "that same day, I had just come back from my 3rd job interview of the week. A coordinator position at a local community college. Salary, $28,000 a year." He let out a quiet, bitter laugh. "I almost took it. I was ready to tell her to transfer, to accept that my career had ended at 52. "What changed?" Madeline asked softly. "Then this morning, you needed me." Evan looked her straight in the eye, voice steady and calm. "Ms. Pierce, saving your company isn't just about work or money. It's about proving that talent can exist anywhere, and that a person's worth isn't defined by their title." He slipped Lily's photo back into his wallet. "It's about ensuring that my daughter, and yours, can grow up in a world where people are seen for who they truly are." Tears streamed down Madeline's face. For the first time in years, she didn't try to hold them back. I have a daughter too," she whispered. "Emma, 14. She's at Exeter." Evan blinked, surprised. "I didn't know." "No one does," Madeline said, wiping her tears. "I keep my private life hidden. Last year, Emma asked me, 'Mom, why are you always so mean to everyone?' She gave a small laugh, then choked on it. 'My 14-year-old daughter thinks her mother is a monster.'" Evan stood, walked to the liquor cabinet, and poured 2 glasses of whiskey. He handed one to her. "Tell me," he said quietly, "what made you become this way?" Madeline took a sip, feeling the hot burn slide down her throat, then exhaled deeply. "I grew up in Brooklyn. My mom worked in an office. My father—" She stopped, her eyes distant. "My father died when I was 16. A construction accident." The reflection of her silhouette glimmered in the window glass. "My mother worked 3 jobs to put me through Columbia. Every night she'd say, 'Maddie, you have to be strong. The world doesn't forgive weakness.'" Evan nodded, his voice low. "And you became strong." Madeline shook her head, giving a bitter smile. "No, I became ruthless. I climbed every rung of the ladder by stepping on others. I thought that was strength. But in truth," her voice trembled, "I was just repeating what had been done to me. When I was an intern, I was humiliated, called the poor girl from Brooklyn. And instead of breaking that cycle, I continued it." Evan stayed silent. Only the ticking clock and the rain tapping against the glass filled the room. Madeline lowered her head, voice shaking. "When I called you—" She couldn't finish the words. "In that moment, I heard the voices of those who once looked down on me, and I realized I'd become them." She turned to him, tears streaming freely now. "Emma was right. I am a monster. And worse, I've turned this company into a place that breeds more monsters like me." Evan set his glass down, his tone calm but resolute. "Ms. Pierce, realizing your fault is the first step. But it's what you do next that defines who you are." Madeline looked up, her eyes red and swollen. "You still think I can change?" "I believe in second chances Evan said, his voice warm. For companies. And for people. The phone buzzed. A text appeared. Emma. Mom, we got the weekend off. Can I come home? Miss you. Madeline looked at the message, a trembling smile spreading across her lips. She turned to Evan. Evan, when we save this company, not if, but when, I want you to help me rebuild it. Not just financially, but humanly. How do you mean? I want to create a place where no one is underestimated. Where talent is seen, no matter where it hides. Her voice grew firmer. A place my daughter can be proud of. Evan smiled, the first genuine smile she'd ever seen from him. Then we'd better prepare well. And they sat back down. 2 people, 2 cups of cold coffee, hundreds of pages of notes, working until 3 in the morning. But this time, they were no longer boss and employee. They were allies, 2 warriors preparing for the biggest battle of their lives. And in the quiet Manhattan night, amid the wind whistling through the glass towers, something new began to take shape. A true friendship, forged in regret, forgiveness, and a shared purpose. 8 a.m. The next morning. The boardroom of Aurelia Dynamics. Madeline had called an emergency meeting. The entire senior leadership team sat around the long wooden table, faces taut as strings about to snap. Everyone knew, in 6 hours, the merger meeting would begin. Marcus Hale, Executive Vice President, 58, silver hair slicked back, spoke first. Madeline, we need clarity. Where's the professional interpreter you hired? Madeline replied crisply. I'd like to introduce Evan Carlisle, our lead interpreter for today's merger. She gestured toward the door. Evan entered in a navy suit, shoulders squared, steps firm. There was no trace left of the chauffeur he once appeared to be. Every eye around the table followed him, doubt written plainly on their faces. David Chen, the CTO, 45, Chinese-American, narrowed his eyes. Wait a second. Isn't he Madeline's driver? The air crackled. Marcus tapped his fingers on the table. Madeline, this is a $1.2 billion deal. We need verified experts, not someone from... Madeline's tone turned icy. From the parking garage? Go on, Marcus. Marcus swallowed. It's about optics. Credibility. The Japanese expect a certain level of professionalism. Susan Walsh, marketing director, 52, nodded in agreement. We can't show up with someone who doesn't fit the image. Madeline tilted her head slightly. What image would that be, Susan? Marcus cut in. Someone who looks the part. Someone they'll respect. Madeline's gaze swept the table. You're questioning his qualifications? Marcus enunciated carefully. I'm questioning his fit. We can't bet everything on someone we barely know. Evan spoke, calm and measured. Mr. Hale, what exactly are your concerns regarding Japanese business etiquette? Marcus straightened slightly, uneasy. Well, cultural nuances, business protocol, gift-giving, bowing, seating arrangements. Evan nodded gently. Ah, you're referring to omiyage, the appropriate bow angle for executive rank, and zaseki, seating by company founding year rather than revenue, correct? The room fell dead silent. Evan continued, still composed. Nakamura's family company was founded in 1952, during post-war reconstruction. They'll expect gifts that acknowledge their family's contribution to Japan's recovery, not expensive ones that imply we're trying to buy influence. Marcus's jaw nearly dropped. And Singh Holdings, by contrast, follows the Anglo-Indian business style, direct communication, minimal ceremony, absolute punctuality. Mrs. Singh will see elaborate gift exchanges as a waste of time. Evan looked around the room, voice steady and controlled. The key is balancing both without offense. Nakamura, in the position of honor, sing with a clear line of sight to the materials. Silence. Then David Chen suddenly switched to Mandarin, clearly to test him. "So you claim to be fluent in Mandarin?" Evan replied instantly, flawlessly, no hesitation, no accent. He spoke about patents, partnership structures, legal subtleties, all in impeccable Mandarin. David Chen's face paled. Where did you study?" "Georgetown. Harvard. And 5 years at the U.S. Embassy in Beijing." Marcus still refused to yield. "Fine, you're good with languages. But you worked for us for 3 years as a driver. Why didn't you ever say anything?" The question hung heavy in the air. Evan looked at Marcus. His eyes held no anger, only fatigue. "I did, Mr. Hale." Many times he turned to Madeline. "Last year, Seoul. I tried to warn about a translation issue. I was told, just drive." Madeline closed her eyes, pained. 6 months ago, Berlin. I knew the problem. I was told, no one pays you to think. Evan's voice carried no bitterness, just truth. So I stopped trying. I chose to believe that one day someone would need exactly what I know. Marcus lowered his head, ashamed. "Today," Evan said quietly, "someone finally does." Madeline rose to her feet. Her voice was low, but sharp as glass. "Ladies and gentlemen, for 3 years, we've had one of America's most accomplished diplomats in our midst, and we've had him driving me to get coffee." She clicked the remote. The screen lit up with a State Department citation. Presidential Commendation for preventing the collapse of U.S.-China trade relations in 2018. Marcus shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Next slide. Lead Negotiator. Asia-Pacific Economic Framework. The very foundation of our international business model. David Chen's face drained of color. Another slide. A letter of recommendation from former Japanese Prime Minister Sato. Evan mediated the Okinawa Base Accord in 2020. Susan Walsh stared at the screen, speechless. Madeline closed the laptop, her tone quiet, but waited. For 3 years, we had an asset beyond value, and we used him to drive me to Starbucks. The boardroom was silent, heavy. Madeline announced, "Effective immediately, Evan Carlisle is Senior Vice President of International Relations. Salary, $180,000 plus stock options. He reports directly to me." She shut the laptop. "Any further questions about Mr. Carlisle's qualifications?" No one spoke. "Good. Because he's about to save this company one by one, the executives stood, approached Evan, offering apologies, handshakes, gestures of overdue respect. When the room finally emptied, Evan turned to Madeline, a faint smirk at the corner of his mouth. "Ready, Ms. Pierce?" Madeline smiled, the first genuine smile in months. "Ready, Mr. Vice President." 2 p.m. The merger meeting was set for 4 o'clock. Evan sat in his newly assigned temporary office, a small room on the 40th floor, but with a window facing east, where the midday light filtered through the glass towers. He was reviewing the documents one last time when his phone vibrated. Unknown number. Mumbai area code. Evan Carlisle. A voice on the other end spoke rapidly, panicked, in Hindi. "Carlisle Saab? मैं कुमार बोल रहा हूँ. Mumbai branch से Kumar Sharma. Mumbai Regional Director of Aurelia." Evan recognized that voice. He'd heard it hundreds of times in calls that had floated through the car when he was still behind the wheel. "Kumar ji, kya hua?" "What's happened, Mr. Kumar?" Evan switched to fluent Hindi. Kumar spoke quickly. A rival company had just attempted to breach the AI system at the Mumbai branch. Fortunately, The tech team had detected it in time, but they needed urgent legal authorization in Hindi. Worse, Priya Singh, CEO of Singh Holdings, Aurelia's key merger partner, was also in Mumbai. If she heard about the breach before the meeting, the deal could collapse. Evan glanced at the clock. 2 p.m. कुमार जी, आप टेंशन मत लो. मैं अभी हैंडल करता हूँ. Don't worry. I'll handle it right now. For the next 20 minutes, Evan coordinated the crisis over the phone. He spoke Hindi with Kumar, English with the legal team in New York, and Mandarin with the engineers in Shenzhen, where the cloud servers were hosted. His voice carried the quiet authority of a man who had managed international crises for 2 decades. Madeline opened the door, about to ask something, then froze. She saw Evan speaking Hindi into the phone, typing Chinese on his laptop, and taking notes in English. All at once. The sight rooted her in place. Only one thought echoed in her head. This is the man I once called a gorilla. Regret flooded through her like a tidal wave. Evan set down the phone and turned to Madeleine. The Mumbai branch was targeted by a rival company. It's handled which rival? Datacorp Singapore. They tried to steal the image recognition algorithm before our deal with Singh is signed. Madeleine sank into her chair, her face drained of color. If Priya Singh finds out about this, that's exactly why I called her first. Madeleine stared at him, disbelief in her eyes. You called Priya Singh? Evan nodded calmly. I told her, in Hindi, her mother tongue, that Aurelia's cybersecurity is stronger than expected. The fact that we detected and blocked the breach within hours proves the strength of your team. He turned his laptop toward her. With her permission, I joined a video call with Kumar Ji to finalize the report. Madeleine read the final message from Priya Singh. Mr. Carlyle, your team's response time is impressive. Aurelia's security system exceeds our expectations. I look forward to meeting you in person in 2 hours. She looked up, voice trembling. Evan, you just saved this deal for the second time in 24 hours. Evan simply shook his head. I didn't save it, Ms. Pierce. Your team did exceptional work. I only made sure the message was delivered the right way. Madeleine looked at him. This man now wearing a perfectly tailored suit, yet still carrying an unshakable humility. Why aren't you prouder of yourself? Evan smiled faintly, wistfully. I spent 22 years standing behind presidents, translating words that could change history. No one knew my name. No one remembered my face. He turned to the window, the afternoon sunlight painting Manhattan in gold. But I knew my work mattered. And for me, that was enough. Madeleine felt her throat tighten. No, Evan. That's not enough. You deserve to be seen, to be recognized. He smiled softly. Today, I was recognized. By who? Madeleine asked. My daughter. Evan lifted his phone and showed her a message he had just sent. Dear Lily, good news. I've been promoted. Your med school tuition is fully covered, all 4 years. Focus on becoming the amazing pediatric oncologist I know you will be. The reply flashed almost instantly. DAD! I can't believe it. I love you so much. You're my hero. Madeleine covered her mouth, tears streaming down her cheeks. Evan stared at the phone, his voice rough with emotion. For the first time in 3 years, I didn't have to lie to my daughter. Madeleine's phone buzzed. Richard Morrison, legal counsel. Madeleine, the Nakamura Singh delegation just arrived. They're in the lobby at the St. Regis. They'd like an informal meeting before the official session. Madeleine looked at Evan. Good sign or bad? Good, he replied. They want to gauge your character before negotiating. In Asian cultures, business is personal. Evan stood, straightening his tie. But we need to prepare carefully. They'll be watching everything. How you sit, shake hands, make eye contact. Then, teach me, Madeline said firmly. For the next 15 minutes, right there in that small office, Evan trained her. How to bow to Hiroshi Nakamura. 15 degrees. Hold for 3 seconds. No direct eye contact. How to shake hands with Priya Singh. Firm grip, steady gaze, no prolonged contact. How to use silence in Japanese negotiations, to let them think, not to fill the pauses. How to speak to an Anglo-Indian executive. Clear, direct, no unnecessary flourishes. And most importantly, Evan said, resting a hand lightly on her shoulder, a gesture both professional and warm. Remember, they're not just buying your company. They're buying your vision, your sincerity. Madeline asked quietly, if they mention our past, about you? Tell the truth, Evan replied, that you were wrong, and that you're learning to see people differently. In every culture, sincerity earns respect. Madeline nodded, drawing a deep breath. All right, let's go meet them. They walked out side by side, no longer CEO and chauffeur, not just boss and employee, but two warriors about to fight for the fate of 200 people. And in both their hearts, the same quiet vow echoed, we have to win. The St. Regis Hotel, 5th Avenue, New York. The grand lobby smelled faintly of cedarwood and Arabica coffee. Golden light spilled across the marble floor, reflecting off Madeline Pierce's shoes as she walked in. Beside her was Evan Carlyle, navy suit pressed, eyes calm yet sharply focused. At the VIP table near the window sat Hiroshi Nakamura, a Japanese man in his early 60s, slight of build, salt and pepper hair, a serene face that carried quiet authority. Beside him was Priya Singh, CEO of Singh Holdings, about 40, radiating a mix of power and grace, draped in an ivory silk sari, a soft pearl necklace at her throat. Madeline inhaled deeply, recalling Evan's instructions. Bow 15 degrees. Hold for 3 seconds. Avoid direct eye contact. She did exactly that. Hiroshi Nakamura responded with a bow of equal depth. That moment, only a few seconds long, felt like an ancient Japanese melody played perfectly in time. No words were exchanged, yet a quiet respect was born. Then Madeline turned to Priya Singh and extended her hand. Miss Singh, it's an honor. Priya clasped her hand, nodding slightly, eyes appraising. Likewise, Ms. Pierce. I've heard interesting things about Aurelia Dynamics. It sounded polite, but it was a test. Madeline smiled confidently. I hope what you hear today is better than what you heard yesterday. Priya blinked, then let out a soft laugh. The tension in the air instantly eased. From his seat behind them, Evan observed. Point 1 for Pierce. Success. They sat. The waiter poured matcha tea for Mr. Nakamura, espresso for Mrs. Singh, and black tea for Madeleine. Evan sat slightly behind them, in the precise posture of an advisor he let them lead. Yet his eyes registered every detail. How Nakamura stirred his tea clockwise, how Singh tilted her cup just a fraction to test the heat. Madeline began. Aurelia Dynamics and Singh Holdings may come from different worlds, but I believe we share one conviction, that technology only matters when it serves humanity. Priya set her cup down, a faint smile appearing. A beautiful philosophy. But I've heard dozens of CEOs say that, and then chase profit at any cost. Madeline replied without missing a beat. That's exactly why I'm here today, to change that. And if anyone understands the value of people over profit, it's Singh Holdings. Priya tilted her head, her gaze shifting. Half surprise, half admiration. Evan glanced at his watch. 3:10 p.m. exactly as he'd predicted. 10 minutes for testing, the next 10 for listening. Hiroshi Nakamura set his cup down and spoke in a deep, steady Japanese tone. Pierce-san, in our culture, there is a concept called kokoro, the heart within one's work. I wonder, does Aurelia possess such a heart? Before Madeline could answer, Evan gently translated, his Japanese voice warm and composed. Then he looked at her and gave a subtle nod. Speak honestly. Madeline took a breath and met Nakamura's eyes. Aurelia once lost that heart, sir. But thanks to people like Mr. Carlyle here, I'm learning how to find it again. Not through words, but through action, Evan translated, preserving every ounce of emotion in her tone. Mr. Nakamura pressed his lips together, then nodded slowly. In that moment, beneath the soft piano drifting through the lobby and the pale afternoon sunlight, an invisible bridge was built. Not through contracts, but through sincerity. Evan looked at Madeleine, the light of renewed faith glimmering in his eyes, something he thought he'd lost after 20 years working behind the scenes. Madeleine met his gaze and gave a small nod. The real battle was about to begin. 4 p.m. The Royal Conference Room, the St. Regis Hotel. The round walnut table gleamed under soft golden light. At its center stood a vase of white peonies, a symbol Evan had personally chosen for its meaning of harmony and rebirth in Asian cultures. On the left sat the Aurelia Dynamics delegation, Madeline Pierce, Evan Carlyle, Richard Morrison, and David Chen. Across from them, Hiroshi Nakamura, with 3 Kairetsu executives, beside him Priya Singh and her legal advisor. The air was still, heavy, almost sacred. All eyes fixed on Madeline, once dismissed as arrogant, now composed, hands resting neatly on the table. Evan sat at her right, calm yet sharply focused. He had sat at negotiation tables where a single wrong word could collapse entire treaties. Today, it was just a business deal. But he knew, for Madeleine, it was redemption. Hiroshi Nakamura spoke first, voice low and even in Japanese. We appreciate Aurelia's efforts to understand our culture, but cooperation cannot rest on goodwill alone. It requires trust, Evan translated fluently, preserving the dignity in his tone. Madeline nodded, replying in slow, steady English. Mr. Nakamura, I'm not asking you to trust me today. I'm only asking for the chance to prove it, through action. Evan rendered her words into classical, respectful Japanese. Watashi tachi no kodo de shinjite itadakeru koto o nozonde imasu. We hope you will come to trust us through what we do. Mr. Nakamura inclined his head slightly, a faint smile touching his lips. He said nothing further, only gestured for his legal representative to open the folder. Priya Singh spoke next, her British Indian accent crisp and cutting as a scalpel. Ms. Pierce, I've reviewed Clause 7, Final Decision Authority. Although the wording has been adjusted, the profit-sharing structure remains unbalanced. Madeline glanced at Evan. He gave a small nod, permission to lead. She answered calmly, Priya, I understand that concern. I've proposed revising the executive ratio to 55-45 instead of 60-40. Singh Holdings would have veto rights on strategic personnel decisions. In return, Aurelia will fully fund all R&D operations for the first 3 years. Priya raised an eyebrow. An interesting proposal. Evan interjected softly, his tone warm. In Japanese business philosophy, the one who gives first earns lasting trust. I believe Mr. Nakamura understands that better than anyone. Mr. Nakamura smiled and nodded. Exactly. In Japan, we call that giri, moral obligation. Madeline seized the moment. And integrity is precisely what Aurelia is rebuilding from the ground up. The atmosphere shifted. Voices, glances, even the rhythm of breathing, all began to align. This was no longer a merger meeting. It had become a judgment of character. 40 minutes passed. Dozens of technical, financial, and legal issues were laid out. Evan guided the dialogue seamlessly through 5 languages: English, Japanese, Hindi, Mandarin, then back to English. No one in the room saw him as a driver anymore. Priya Singh occasionally paused just to listen to how his tone changed. Firm when discussing finance, gentle when speaking of people. A true diplomat. When the final document was placed on the table, Mr. Nakamura looked around, his voice deep and calm. "We agree in principle. But one final matter remains." The room went silent. Aurelia once lost its direction. "How do I know this time will be different?" Madeline's voice trembled slightly, but her eyes were bright. "Because this time, the person sitting beside me isn't an outside consultant. He's the man who taught me how to listen again." She turned to Evan. Every gaze in the room followed. He stood and bowed gently. "Mr. Nakamura, in your language there is a word. Kintsugi, the art of mending broken pottery with gold. Aurelia doesn't hide its cracks. We will use them to become stronger." Mr. Nakamura was silent for a long moment, then smiled. "If every company in the world had someone who understood our culture as you do, there would be fewer wars." He extended his hand. Madeline shook it, then reached for Priya Singh's. Both women nodded. Evan looked around the room, the late afternoon light glinting off the polished wood. A full circle had closed. For the first time in 3 years, he wasn't standing behind the glass wall. He was being seen. The meeting ended amid camera shutters, respectful bows, and genuine mutual regard. In the corridor, Madeline spoke softly, her voice husky but warm. "Evan, thank you. Not just for saving the company, but for saving me." He smiled, a rare peace in his eyes. "No, Ms. Pierce. You just needed someone to clear the windshield. The driver always knew the way." 6 p.m. The New York sky turned amber. Sunlight poured through the towering glass windows of the St. Regis, sweeping across the long conference table. Now empty. Documents, glasses, pens, all remained in place. But the air had changed. Lighter. Warmer. Like a city after a storm. Still wet. But the air strangely clean. Madeline stood alone by the window, watching the slow river of cars along Fifth Avenue. Her fingertips brushed the surface of the table, the same spot where, just hours earlier, she had held her breath, waiting for every reaction from Nakamura and Singh. Footsteps echoed behind her. Evan Carlyle entered. No longer the man tensed for battle, just a 52-year-old man, tall, a little tired, yet with eyes alight, like a small flame newly rekindled. "They've signed the Memorandum of Understanding," Madeline said, her voice still trembling slightly. "Nakamura wants to meet the tech team next week." Singh proposed hosting a joint conference in New Delhi. Evan nodded, a faint smile curling at the corner of his mouth. "I told you. We'd win." A pause. Madeline turned to him, her voice low. "You know, I used to think winning meant being above others. Turns out, it means rising above yourself." Evan looked at her. In his eyes, there was no trace of hierarchy, only the quiet recognition between two people who had both walked through the fire of their own egos. "You did something most people never dare. Admit you were wrong," he said softly, "and start again." Madeline smiled. "Maybe this time I'm finally beginning to be a real CEO." Late evening. Evan's apartment in Queens. Simple, orderly. His travel bag still sat unopened. He hung his jacket over a chair and poured himself a small glass of whiskey. The warm light glowed against a small framed photo on the desk. Him and Lily, standing in front of the Johns Hopkins gate. Evan sat down, opened his laptop, and began typing an email. To Lily Carlisle. Subject: Dad just finished a long day. You know, sweetheart, today I was called Vice President. But what makes me proudest is that I kept my promise. I didn't give up. I'll see you this weekend. I'll drive down, just like old times. Love, Dad. He hit send, then leaned back in his chair. The city lights shimmered through the small window, reflecting in the eyes of a man who had once stood behind countless doors of power, and who was finally, quietly, at peace with himself. The next morning, Aurelia Dynamics headquarters, 42nd floor. Madeline Pierce walked into her new office. No more expensive abstract paintings. No more glass walls creating distance. In their place hung a large photograph, a group shot with the entire staff. The engineers, the guards, the drivers. At the center stood Evan Carlisle, smiling. Rebecca, the young assistant, entered, holding a stack of files. Ms. Pierce, everyone's ready for the Monday briefing. Madeline nodded, then glanced toward the window. Rebecca, today, let me make my own coffee. She switched on the coffee machine herself, poured the first cup with her own hands. Steam rose, filling the room with the scent of fresh coffee. The scent of a new beginning. A silver-gray Mercedes S-Class rolled slowly down 6th Avenue. There was no longer a partition between the front and back seats. Evan drove. Madeline sat beside him. Neither spoke, but the silence was peaceful. At a red light, Evan stopped. Madeline turned to him, smiling. Have you ever thought? This car carried two different people once, and brought them both back again? Evan kept his eyes on the road ahead, sunlight catching his gaze. This time, he said softly, no one sitting in the back anymore. The light turned green. The Mercedes glided through the intersection, merging into the Manhattan traffic. In the distance, the setting sun glinted off the car's windows, a streak of gold, like forgiveness and hope. Some people spend their whole lives behind the wheel, but sometimes they're the ones keeping the journey from falling off the edge. Evan Carlisle didn't just save a company. He saved faith in a woman, in hundreds of employees, and in his own daughter. And Madeline Pierce. She finally understood that real power doesn't lie in the CEO's chair, but in the courage to listen to those she once dismissed. Perhaps every driver in our lives carries a story worth hearing. If you believe humility can still save this world, subscribe to True Tale Time and join us for more journeys where the seemingly smallest people do the greatest things. Because sometimes what we truly need isn't power, but someone who knows the way.